Good evening. MPs have been told how a violent extremist film promoting jihad was shown to pupils at a Birmingham school. The Commons Education Committee today heard evidence about an alleged plot to promote a hardline Islamic agenda in city schools. The allegations first came to light back in March through the anonymous letter, the so-called Trojan Horse plot. Then in June, Ofsted revealed it had carried out inspections at 21 schools where there were concerns. Now, this week, 6 of those schools start the new academic year in special measures. Kevin Reid reports.
Order. Good morning and welcome.
In front of MPs today, 2 key figures in the so-called Trojan Horse inquiries. Peter Clarke led the government investigation, Ian Kershaw, Birmingham City Council's. It was a chance for politicians to pick through the fine detail. In one instance, they wanted to know more about a video shown to children by a teacher, and specifically the subject matter.
Violent extremism.
Promoted as a jihadist, violent extremist promotional video.
Yeah.
Shown to children.
So shown in, well, let me just be clear, shown in one classroom at one moment, and that should have been stopped and it should not have happened.
The MPs also wanted to know why Birmingham Council was slow to act when it had known about the Trojan Horse allegations for some time. One MP suggested there was a fear of losing Muslim votes, but a senior Birmingham councillor, who also appeared before the committee today, said they have to act sensitively.
Obviously, when you are operating in an environment such as Birmingham, with many communities living side by side, you have to be aware of things that may cause social cohesion issues. We're a city that's had social tensions before. We've had race riots in the not too recent past. We have to be aware of how those things will play out.
And there were also questions about the actual appointment of Peter Clarke, a former head of UK counter-terrorism. At the time, the Chief Constable of West Midlands Police, Chris Sims, said it sent out the wrong message. Today was the first time Mr Clarke had responded in public.
For much of my police career, I actually worked in diverse communities and senior positions in the inner city, in Haringey, in Hackney, in Tower Hamlets, in Wandsworth, and indeed was the borough divisional commander at Brixton.
And with schools?
We're inevitably working with schools.
There's likely to be many more parliamentary questions about what happened in Birmingham schools, but for now, those at the centre of the investigations are getting ready for a new school year. Parkview Academy in Alum Rock is one of the 21 schools investigated. The teachers are back in there today ahead of a full return tomorrow. Nobody wanted to go on camera, but I did speak to a member of the school's new governing trust, and she said they were very optimistic about the future and looking forward to the start of the new term. Kevin Reid, BBC Midlands Today, Birmingham.
Well, joining me now is Dr. Chris Allen, who's a lecturer in social policy at the University of Birmingham. Good evening, thanks for joining us. Now, staff, pupils and parents, they'll be very keen to put the whole of this Trojan Horse plot behind them, won't they?
Yeah.
How realistic is that?
Well, I think that it's unfortunate that the Education Select Committee was on the first day of school, so I think that that's actually thrown the lens of scrutiny back onto these schools, and I think that's really is unfortunate. I think one of the things that we have to be concerned about is that there is this kind of whiff of there's no smoke without fire, and I think the perspective of today is that we know that there wasn't a plot, to take over schools. There's been very little in terms of evidence of extremism in schools. So I think that, whilst it's good news on one part, it's also going to be very difficult for the parents, for the staff and for the students themselves to actually kind of rid themselves of this, in the near future.
You talk about the near future, but what about the longer term future for the pupils of this school? Could there be some sort of stigma attached to them, thinking about longer term education or even employment?
Well, an event we did at the University of Birmingham where we got some of the teachers in from the schools, we got some parents in, we got local people to talk about this. And actually what they were really concerned about was the kind of stigma that came with this, is that, guilt by association. So that when students want to go into kind of higher education or further education or go into the employment sector, actually because of they're at these schools which have had such a kind of, big hoo-ha around them, that actually that's going to stick with them, and there's going to be this kind of thing as well, actually weren't you at one of the extremist schools? And I think that can have a really detrimental impact.
What about the wider Muslim community? Is it likely this could have an impact not only on the schools involved?
Well, I think that when we look at Birmingham, I mean, Birmingham is this hugely diverse and, really, vibrant city in terms of its diversity. And I think that one of the problems we have here is that Muslim communities will increasingly feel like they're a kind of suspect community, that, constantly they're being looked at, in these kind of these frames of extremism, radicalisation and so on. And of course, this comes hot on the heels of Project Champion a few years ago when we had the spy cameras put around certain Muslim areas. So, so Muslim communities, are really struggling to find confidence to actually be a part of the city. And this can really send out a terrible message to young people in particular. If you don't feel as though you belong in the city where you were born and where you live, this can be really problematic in the long term.
Dr. Chris Allen, thanks for your time this evening.
Thanks very much.
You're with Midlands Today. Good to have you with us. Coming up later in the programme,